Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with the next update to the Canadian federal election projection of 2021. So, this is the last projection before the debates, obviously, because they're today and tomorrow. In fact, actually, I think technically the French debate today has already occurred by the filming of this video. But either way, so this is the last projection before the debates, and really this is the last potential inflection point. I think the trend that comes out of Thursday night is going to be the trend on election day. I don't think there's really any more room in the campaign. Like, sure, there'll be 11 more days remaining, but I don't really think there's going to be much time for an inflection point after that. Whatever trend's there following the debate will be the trend going into election day. Though there is something to note that a trend from a debate can take time to take a couple days before you can really see it clearly, because everyone will get an initial bump or dip, and then it will stabilize as people's first reactions after the debate performance. As the debate loses recency in their mind, they're more likely to revert back. So if Trudeau has a really bad performance, he might lose a lot of support in the next couple, 2 or 3 days after the debate. But then, as it gets a little older, he'll regain some of that support. He'll probably still be net down in this hypothetical example, but it won't be as bad as it could have been. A prime example of this, as you might tell if you are keen-eyed and are looking at this map and comparing it to the last one, happened with O'Toole coming out of the last debate. He took a hit. This is 100% true. He took a hit. I will get into that hit after I go over the basic details here, but he took a hit in the polls. He went from about a 5-point lead to 3-ish lead. He seems to be rebounding now. It's hard to say if he'll rebound back to the 3.5 or 5-point lead, or if he's going to rebound to a lower margin. But he does appear to be rebounding on the daily trackers, so Nanos, Main Street, and Ecos. That said, he did take a hit, and it has closed the race up a bit, though his lead in seat total was never particularly great because of the quirkiness of how seats are distributed. The Liberals have a very huge advantage. The urban areas of Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and lesser extent Ottawa are basically the only spaces outside of Atlantic Canada where the Liberals are competitive. And those are where a significant amount of seats are. Basically 4 cities are what prop up the Liberal Party, which is unfortunate. That it's a lot of people, don't get me wrong, in those 4 cities, but it's not very representative of Canada as a whole. But those 4 cities could very well vote in Trudeau again, because if you see here, he's only tailing by 3. So let's go over the changes in what has occurred. So starting to the east, the Liberals retook back Bonavista Turin in Newfoundland. It's still razor sharp, and Atlantic Canada, I will note, has my least confidence because of how erratic the polling is. Today alone, there was a poll. Ecos had plus 10 margin. Main Street had, or Conservatives plus 10. Main Street had Liberals plus 6, I think. Nanos had it plus Liberals plus 3. This would count for yesterday, but was released today. An Ipsos poll had Liberals plus 15. All new polls added to the model today. So it's extremely chaotic. There's a huge margin of error there just from the different polls. I've said this last couple updates, but the numbers here and the colors shaded here really should be taken with a grain of salt. Same thing with 338 Canada. Same thing with every other projection. No one knows what's going on in Atlantic Canada. The polling is so chaotic. There's no clear trend showing. There's no trend line. There's nothing meaningful you can get from it. Maybe, like, if we skip here for a second, you could say maybe on a macro level, the Conservatives have gained some ground and the Liberals have lost some ground, but on a day-over-day basis, there's so much margin of error on this that that's just not worth saying anything. So who knows what's going on here? These seats are pretty speculative at this point. I don't. If the polling as a whole, the poll average is correct, this could be fine. But the problem is with a poll average of this is if Ecos is having a Conservative like plus 12, or I think that's what it is, and then in the same day, Main Street has it closer to. Actually, I'm just going to check this real quick. They have it Liberal plus 8. Well, the average of Liberal plus 8 and Conservative plus 12 minus, like, sample sizes and all that stuff. Like, if you just do a rough average, would be, what, Conservative plus 2? I think. Conservative plus 2 would be the average, which would mean the Conservatives are going to get a lot of seats here. Then you add Nanos, then you add other parties, and it starts getting. You really see here because, like, even just the Ecos Main Street example, sure, the average Conservative plus 2, but if it turns out that Main Street is wrong, which happens, and no fault of the pollster, just they can be wrong, especially with smaller sample sizes like Atlantic Canada has. I think about 150 people, 100 to 150 people is typically what's polled. Well, if Main Street's wrong, a Conservative plus 12 margin is a blue sweep. That's going to be like 20 seat pickup. Liberal plus 8, the Conservatives might pick up Miramichi, Grand Lake, maybe Fredericton, maybe another one in Nova Scotia. Really depends on exactly what the support is. But you see the big difference here. Liberal plus 8, maybe a couple seats for the Conservatives. Conservatives plus 12, like 20 seats. And the difference there is important because that could be the difference between a Conservative majority and a Conservative minority or a Liberal government. Even a Liberal majority government. So the fact that the polling is just completely batshit in Nova Scotia, or sorry, Atlantic Canada, is just very irritating to me. But we will continue moving west. So Quebec, NDP picked up a seat from Bloc. I don't remember which one. I think it's from Rimouski, but it doesn't matter. The specifics do not matter which specific seat it is because a lot of the swing seats change literally every single day. Because a lot of them are very close to margin of error. Like, for example, Yukon is forecast to be won by the Conservatives by hundreds of votes. Like, maybe 200. So yeah, it's blue column because they're leading, but that's the margin is so low that all that matters is turnout on election day or in our early polls. So, again, moving into Ontario, this is an interesting example of where the NDP do actually hurt both parties. They have picked up a seat from the Conservatives and a seat from the Liberals, which is an interesting result here. I don't remember which seat they picked up from the Conservatives. Presumably, like, one in Northern, like maybe this one. Can't think of the name of this riding, Thunder Bay something. I think that was in the Conservative column. I think the NDP's picked it back up, and Davenport in Toronto is what they grabbed. Liberals, Saskatchewan, Saskatoon West, I think, is what went to NDP. Again, not surprising. And then the Liberals picked up 2 around Greater Vancouver area. Which 2, I don't remember. Doesn't really matter. So this has brought a narrower lead. And if we go to seat trend, the Conservatives have lost seats for the last 3 days from their high of 147 on September 5th. And what does September 5th give us? That gives us Sunday. Ah, the last video. Interesting. So it took a couple days, but the damage definitely did happen from the debate. And some people, I'm going to flip over to this screen here, will say that the damage from the debate was from his unclear stance on guns. I'm going to give you a different perspective. I think the damage of the debate was from his guns, but entirely because of his flip-flop. Now, I will give him credit. It's not the hugest flip-flop because presumably any technocratic's the wrong word, but any actual review of the firearm system will come to the same conclusion that his platform had, because the current gun control system we have is not rational at all. There's no coherence to it. So, presumably, an actual review will get to the same conclusion. But the fact that he did that change there, I think made him lose a lot of support to the People's Party. It took a couple days to taper through, but we look here at his high on September 5th, which is a couple days after the debate, but what's the word for this? So the polls lag the public, and my model lags the polls. So this high on September 5th probably more corresponds to like I think it actually works out to be like the last day, like the day after the debate, before any real impact sort of occurred from it. And the flack he took over the weekend is what really caused the damage. And again, we look here, 17.2 or 37.2, and now he's at 37.7. He's lost 0.4. The People's Party was at 2.6, and they're now at 2.9. They gained 0.3. I think most of that 0.3 came from the Conservatives. We look at the other people who've gained since then, the NDP, they gained 0.6, where some of that, obviously the 0.1, probably came from Greens. The Liberals have literally stayed flat, and the Bloc lost a bit. So, yeah, the NDP picked up some from the Bloc, some from Third Party, some from the Conservatives, and some from Greens. Kind of a bit from everybody. I think it's pretty safe to say here that the Greens are pretty much dead. If they don't win, if they lose all their seats this election, I think the party just dies. They might be able to survive just entirely based off that Elizabeth May is the favorite in her own riding. But that's not it's not great news for the party. And it looks like the NDP is really taking the situation and absorbing, consolidating that part of the left, the progressive left of Canada. So we'll see if that continues into election day, because they might absorb even more of this Green support. And this is actually why the NDP gained a huge number of seats. They gained 6 seats since the 25th. And a lot of that, some of it, the ones they gained in Quebec, is because they took support from the Bloc. Because we actually look in Quebec itself, O'Toole is either flat or gained. Liberals are flat or lost. They definitely lost. NDP definitely gained, and Bloc definitely lost. People's Party also gained. Greens, they lost a bit, but yeah. So a lot of the seats that they're picking up outside of Quebec is because they gained support. They're capitalizing a lot on the Green support, and they're consolidating votes where it matters, which is helping them a lot in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Because we go back this main projection, they're picking up a seat here, and this is happening on a regular basis now, that seats are being picked up by are sliding into the NDP column of Saskatchewan. Mind you, they typically bounce back in the next day or so, but I think it's very possible they could even keep that seat if they keep consolidating the progressive vote, because having a Green and an NDP vote separately, just kind of, it's not a waste of votes. I don't think any party you're voting for is a waste, but it does make it easier for another party to, in this case the Conservatives, to come up in the middle. And this happens a lot in Toronto area, so I would expect the Liberals to get put a lot of heat on it if this keeps consolidating in Ontario. The other important thing to note here, as we have seen here, is since the debate, I think the actual debate was on, what, September 2nd? The Liberals have flatlined. They're hovering at roughly their 2019 vote support, but not their 2019 regionals. As you can see, they're only plus 2.4 in Ontario, and their only reason they aren't losing seats in Quebec is because the Bloc is also losing support in Quebec. They gained a bit in the prairies, and they've gained some in BC, but at the expense of Ontario was definitely not a good trade. A Liberal majority at this point, barring good debate performance today and tomorrow, very unlikely. In fact, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's very difficult now. He's very much put himself in a position where if the Liberals do pull out a win, it's likely going to be a much smaller minority government, and put him in a worse position going into a new election. And if he does call one in 18 months, which he's threatened to, because he will have fewer incumbents, because he's likely going to lose a lot of incumbents in Atlantic Canada and Ontario, which will be really bad for him, and will be strong for the Conservatives, because incumbency bias is a thing. It's not the only thing that matters, but it does matter. If the NDP also keeps consolidating Green support into the NDP, it will also make any future election call even more dicey for the Liberals. So you will see going forward where this ends up projecting. And the debates today and tomorrow, I think, are going to make whatever projection I have today largely a big old asterisk, because yes, the Conservatives are only leading by 3 seats today, but by Sunday, when I have the next video, there's going to be a whole new set of data out. There's going to be a lot of movement coming out of these debates, and it's really hard to say where it's going to go. The French ones are relatively contained. So in a sense, unless the Trudeau and Singh or whoever wants to punch O'Toole has come up with new attacks, O'Toole's likely going to walk away from the English debate really well. And it seems like he walked away from the last French debate gaining in Quebec. I'm not really sure what else he can punch O'Toole with. Say, like, he flip-flopped on the guns, but now that he's flip-flopped, like, what do you punch him with? Can't really use that issue anymore. So I don't think there's much ammunition left to throw at him, so I think he might actually walk away from these quite strong. He might even bounce and go up. Blanchet's a wild card, but his debate performance only matters tonight in French, and I do not speak French very well, so I'm not watching it, since the translations make it irritating. So I guess this is all to say that this projection, while interesting, and I think academically worth the effort as a means of tracking campaign progress, is largely irrelevant and will be obsolete completely by Sunday. I expect my 2 cents, of having done this for a while now, is O'Toole's either going to walk away by Sunday regaining seats closer back to 147, maybe even higher, or he's going to be second place. There's no path I see where this narrow lead for O'Toole continues past these debates. Either he recovers or he goes down. I do not see him staying where he is. Same thing with Singh. Same thing with Trudeau. These debates will decide the winner of the election. Though, as might be seen here, my People's Party numbers are quite small here, because I'm forecasting a lot of strategic voting, and there's also a huge amount of error bars on these. Ecos today had People's Party at around 10%, but Ipsos yesterday, even though it was released today, had the People's Party at like 4. Or was it 3? I think it was 3. Huge margin of error. 3 and 10 are not real values that the People's Party can both hold. You could argue that Ipsos's 3 might be more realistic because it's pretty close to what I have here, but I don't believe that number, frankly. I do not think that only 3% of people are going to vote People's Party. I'm going to rephrase this. I don't think only 3% of people are open to it, and people do not, generally speaking, do not signal their strategic voting intention on polls. Because a lot of strategic voting intention happens on the ballot box when you're sitting there and you have to write a name, or you just pass them your ID and you're getting your ballot and you're in the line and you're like, who do I vote for? In the last minute introspective, and you're like, hold my nose, vote blue, or hold my nose, vote red, hold my nose, vote light blue? What are you called? Block numbers, color. So I think 3 is unrealistic. I think 10 is probably also unrealistic, considering strategic voting and historical polling error of one election, which I might be over forecasting. But if we look at this, let's say hypothetically Ecos is correct and the People's Party does walk away with, or it does literally have 10% right now who want to vote PPC and will vote PPC and won't strategic vote. This changes everything. It literally changes the entire election. You might end up seeing an unfortunate reality where, because of right-wing vote splitting, Trudeau wins a majority government, which would be awful. He really doesn't deserve it. But you could also see a situation, because if you also look at Ecos's poll today, the Conservatives were still leading by a good amount. So you could see a situation where the Conservatives win a minority government that are propped up by the People's Party, which would be funny. And it should also be worth noting that if these numbers are true and the People's Party does get low double digits or high single digits, as of today, they don't, going through the debates, if O'Toole or Trudeau or anyone is hammered really hard and no one likes the people on stage, more people could go PPC. It's a very unlikely, but there's a non-zero chance that People's Party could be the Crown. The Crown? The party that crowns the actual Prime Minister this election. Depends on how much their vote support happens, though the risk is that for People's Party voters, they could end up getting a more left-wing government than they want. Especially because if in places like Atlantic Canada and Ontario, where a lot of ridings are razor edge, a few people voting People's Party instead of Conservative or vice versa can cause seats to go up the middle to the Liberals. Historically, that hasn't been enough to actually change the outcome of the election, but historically we've only had one election, People's Party, so who knows what that actually means going forward. But keep your eye on it. People did not consider them significant going into this election. They're not finding to the debates because of it, but I think that assessment was very wrong. I think they very underestimated how many people are dissatisfied with the current slate of parties, because really voting People's Party at this point just says you're dissatisfied with Canada as a whole. There's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but that's what it says. And it seems like a lot more people are dissatisfied with Canada as a whole than a lot of mainstream media pundits thought, but hey, whoever said the mainstream media was good at their job. Anyways, if you had a good video, if you enjoyed the video, please like, share, subscribe, comment below if you have thoughts about who's going to come to the debates. If you think my analysis is correct, if you think my analysis is wrong and that O'Toole does have more to lose going into these debates today and tomorrow, or if, you have any interesting findings from your own writings, like does it seem like the mood's in one way or the other? Does it seem like it's changed since the debates? Does it seem like people actually are engaged? Voter enthusiasm? Because voter enthusiasm is quite important. It does look like, in a lot of the polls that have tried to assess it, that the Conservatives and Bloc have a lot of voter enthusiasm, or have a big voter enthusiasm advantage over the NDP and the Liberals, which could mean that on election day, a lot of these really tight seats, but there's a lot of, I think if we go back to this thing, I believe there's close to 10 in Ontario and 5 or 6 in Atlantic, Canada alone, between Liberals and the Conservatives, that a small increase in voter support could lead to easily 15 seats flipping, which doesn't put the Conservatives in a majority government, but does definitely make it so a Trudeau staying in power is nearly impossible. I do not think you'll get a situation where both the NDP and the Bloc are willing to prop up a Liberal minority government over propping up a Conservative minority government. Mostly the Bloc. I think the Bloc would rather Conservative minority government, but we'll see post-election shenanigans if that actually does happen. Otherwise, I hope you all enjoyed the video and have a good day or evening.